The work that Relatives for Justice does work with a lot of families who've been affected by policies of surveillance and counter-insurgency that are connected to our militarised conflict. So the people that we support will uncover facts where they realise that their loved ones who are now deceased, or themselves, they'd been under intense surveillance for a period of time in the advance of the violation that they suffered. And trying to get to the heart of that can be critical to uncovering the truth of the circumstances of their loved one's death. And it is not easy. Trying to find out the policies of surveillance, the policies of counterinsurgency that were in place in a given time at a given place is very, very difficult, and often the subject of intense court proceedings and trying to go down routes of trying to have files released. And we meet a state that recloses files. So some of you here will know about children who were killed by plastic bullets in the 1980s. Their families have tried to uncover the files relating to the deaths of those children. And files that were available 10 and 15 years ago have been reclosed by the British state in the National Archives because they are now subject to legacy investigations where there may be some opportunity for uncovering a recourse for accountability. So those things are happening about violations that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now we find ourselves in a place where there are policies of surveillance and counterinsurgency around ourselves as we live in what's meant to be a non-militarised, non-conflict era. So it's obviously very, very relevant and very depressing in some ways.
It's not a question of having something to hide. It's a question of having a right to a private life. That's the starting point. There's plenty of things you'd tell your partner, your doctor, friends, or someone else that you wouldn't want the entire world to know, or that you wouldn't want the state to know. A state and its public authorities are made up of thousands and thousands of people. All of whom, even if they're either running dodgy policies themselves or may well have individual reasons to break those rules. But whatever's happened in the past, obviously the digital age takes this to a completely different level, because there is so much information about an individual that can now be tracked, and a lot of us very helpfully carry mobile phones around in our pocket. That's gathering a lot of information about what information you read, your location, that sort of stuff. And we're also at a stage where practically everyone can film everyone else through CCTV cameras and in lots of places, and even states which were constrained by needing the people to actually spy on other people aren't that constrained anymore, because they've found ways of getting machines to crunch through and troll through data and spy on other people. So we're in a really frightening place in relation to the digital world, in the sense that a state can build up a really detailed picture of individual movements.
When you go for a PIP assessment with all this CCTV and stuff, before you even go in that building, you're outside and they've got cameras on you. So you get to that building, you've already lost points on your assessment because you planned and executed a journey. So they then take the points off you because you have done that. And they're watching you from before you go in that building. They watch you, they're watching you outside, arriving, how you walk, how you get to the assessment room from the reception area. And I've read reports and it's like, oh, they're well kept. You could be in your jammies, but the report will say, they're well kept, they opened a bottle of juice, they took a drink. So they're watching everything. It's the same with, like, you know, from DLA to PIP, from starting out with PIP, they're constantly watching. And then you've got this where, oh, right, they're watching your Facebook, don't be putting nothing on Facebook. One thing that's always got me when you're dealing with PIP and Capita and the DFC is they call you a customer. You're not going to buy a pint of milk. You're trying to get benefits that are rightfully yours. And the other one, a client. You're not going to see your solicitor. And now you've got this one, criminal, because you feel like a criminal, because you're being judged and watched the minute you put that claim in. They are watching you. And that's how a lot of people feel. And then with people with mental health, they're bad enough as it is. Their paranoia levels go through the roof. Their mental health is affected more by the process of all this, made to feel like a criminal, made to feel like you're committing fraud with the things that they say, the things that they put in their reports, and it's just ridiculous. And like I say, 3 C's: client, customer, criminal. No, you're none of them.
Just talking about the Aspen card, this is a debit card that people get as an asylum seeker, which contains £37 per week. You get that card, but just on that card, the Aspen card, there's so much, surveillance being done on the card, because from which shops you go to, if you shop at the likes of Tesco's, that's normal. But if I start buying ice cream, probably at is it M&S, every other day, it kind of shows that it's seen as wasting money. Yes, they keep links, they can see what people are actually buying. And if I was to use my Aspen card in an area, probably I live in Belfast, if I was to go to England, and spend time there, they have pulled out records of people and said, what have you been doing there for that long? You were not supposed to be there, and all of that. So people are being tracked using that Aspen card. This has a really big impact on people's health, mental health, physical health, everything that you can think of. It's created a paranoia, it's created so much anxiety within people. I mean, if you're constantly watched, you're being watched every other day, it just creates some kind of anxiety, and it really makes people paranoid. I mean, people are afraid to shop in places, even if it's discounted. People are worried, who's watching? What are they going to say? If I buy this, what's being said? It's just not a healthy way of living. People are afraid of buying things like toys for their children. I mean, if I go and buy at a Smith's stores, even if it's discounted or not discounted, it should be up to me what I buy. But those are things that, are being looked at. You took your money and you spent it at Smith's stores. People are not free to just live normal lives like everybody else.
What we've now found in Manchester is this first emerged with the anti-fracking protests in Lancashire. That the police there were looking at the disabled protesters and passing on their details to the DWP, or here it be the Department of Communities. And it was a deliberate tactic to basically frighten people into not protesting. Because, and this needs to be saying, is that, what's his name? Dr. David Webster, Glasgow University, did a very good report about the DWP's sanction culture, their surveillance culture. And he said it's a shadow penal system, but without all of the protections that you'd get in the sort of kind of criminal justice system. I'd say it's pretty similar to living under the Stasi in East Germany. And I'd say it's also one of our members wrote a very good piece about it recently and called it the panopticon. You are always, not only, maybe you're not always under surveillance, but the mental thing it does to you is you actually start to internalise that and change your behaviour. So it's like, oh, can I be out and enjoying myself? Can I be a visibly disabled person having a good life and not get in trouble for it? The psychological warfare aspect of that cannot be dismissed, as well as the fact that you already feel that you're under surveillance, that you've got, we don't know how much they blanket request CCTV footage of disabled people in supermarkets or shopping centres or leisure centres. We don't know. We don't know if that's only when they suspect they've got a reasonable case for fraud, or are they just doing blanket interception? We don't know. Again, when you, like it was said, when you go to the centre for an assessment, just by the way, just turning up is a mark against you. It's catch-22. Turned up, you can't be so bad. If you don't turn up, we'll close your case.
People are already living Big Brother, and this society here, particularly where we are now in West Belfast, have lived through all of this and know the damage and the legacy of surveillance and counter-insurgency. But it's here, it's crept in broad daylight under all of our noses. Go up and down the road and have a look at all the cameras at every single intersection. The cameras are only what's visible, what we can see. But Liz was talking about going up to the library in Ardoyne and seeing it all around her in the community she lives in, people really struggling and getting hammered by PIP, but people starting to articulate the extent that it goes into people's minds and psyche, that people are self-censoring. And I think it's so important that we start to talk about people's right to have freedom of expression and protest is being completely clamped down on here. That people, if what's happening over Manchester is probably happening here as well, that people cannot turn up in a protest. The Right to Work group did a survey outside the Doles. They did it in 2014-15, Gareth, and then you did it again last year. And one of the big things that people found was a huge shift, that people were much more fearful to engage. This was a human rights group monitoring people's experiences of social security. People were literally afraid to approach the table that they had outside. People were giving out cups of tea, having a chat. They saw a huge shift in those few years even, that people were afraid to be seen. Just that sense that maybe somebody was looking out the window from the brew at them. So we need to start looking at that. It's having a massive impact on people's mental health. I'm not sure if anybody saw last week, there was an article in the Belfast Telegraph, the Department for Communities, almost like a preemptive strike, but they will say that they need these powers because they need to be able to investigate fraud, that fraud is eating away at their budget, at our money, your money. But when we asked about the fraud, 5.9 billion of a social security budget in 2016-17, they told us then that fraud represents 0.018% of that budget, just over 1,114,000. So that's the scale that they're saying. They've come back since and said no, fraud is 0.9%, and we're saying get your figures right at least, you know. But regardless, fraud is a tiny, tiny bit of social security. But all you see when you go onto the department's website every single week is a benefit fraud weekly review. And you'll see it in the papers. And people are being brought to court, and we're talking to people here before the event, people are being brought to court for, you know, a few £100s. But they're creating a culture that basically everybody, if you're looking for benefits and you need the state to provide to support you, which is your right, then you're work shy, you're a shirker, and you're a scrounger, and you're trying to take money that isn't yours. I mean, that is the ideology that's underpinning all of this, to dismantle the welfare state.